Well, the escalation in the war in Ukraine is getting worse by the minute, not better. It seems instead of calling for peace, there is additional escalation that's moving us closer to nuclear war. And there's a big event that's being held in Washington, D.C., called the Rage Against the War Machine, which will be held on February 19th. One of the organizers of that event is Nick Brana, who is joining us now on the show. Nick, welcome to the show. We are vehemently anti-war on this show. When I heard you were putting this event together, I said we've got to get you guys on the show to get the word out as much as possible. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us on, Clayton.
So what was the impetus for this event? What was maybe the moment that you said we need to mobilize? We need to bring people to the nation's capital, and we need to really bring awareness about this.
I think it was the progression of the war and the fact that it's become increasingly clear that this is not, in fact, even a proxy war, but it is a direct war between the United States and Russia. That is now what the Ukrainian defense minister has said, that they are fighting the war on behalf of NATO. The logistics, the weapons, the targeting, the strategy, everything comes from NATO. And also you have that being said also by the Russian defense minister. You have it increasingly said in the West. You have, of course, the German foreign minister that is saying that that they were at war with Russia and speaking on behalf of Germany, but also on behalf of all of Europe when she makes that comment, all of Western Europe. So it's that escalation and the fact that, of course, there are now red lines that are being crossed that were initially drawn by including the Biden administration, the most pro-war, warmongering factions of the U.S. government, that is, of course, the aggressor in this conflict. The fact that just a few months ago, they were saying to send tanks, are you crazy? That would be a third world war. And yet here we are with tanks being deployed from the United States, from many different countries across Europe, including most absurdly and ironically, Germany. Being deployed from Germany. Who thought that we would see German tanks again being deployed towards Russia to fight Russia? I think people don't understand that 27 million Russians died defeating the first Nazi regime in Europe. And the idea that Russia was simply going to tolerate the establishment of another one with a 30-nation transatlantic military alliance behind it that is shipping it tens of billions of dollars, $100 billion plus in weapons and military aid, that it was going to tolerate that they were going to tolerate the induction of Ukraine into NATO, the placement of missiles that could strike nuclear missiles, cruise missiles that could strike Russian cities, including Moscow, in just 3, 4, 5 minutes. That is absurd. People have to understand that Russia has been invaded from the West several times, and that invasion path goes through Ukraine. There is a historic generational memory in Russia of the First World War, the Second World War, what was done to them during the 90s with the absolute devastation, the fact that Russia's domestic product crashed by 50% with the Yeltsin administration that was essentially installed by the United States. That's why Putin has a 70, 80% favorability rating while fighting this war. And that's why he calls it existential. And it's not just Putin, it's all of Russia. It's the Kremlin that agrees with this. No Western country, the United States, the UK, any country in Western Europe could draft hundreds of thousands of people to fight a war without facing a revolution. And yet you see that the leadership in Russia is able to do that because they correctly have assessed, with the agreement of the Russian people, that this is an existential war being waged by the United States, UK, and all of NATO against them, with the explicit goal of balkanizing Russia, of cutting it up into multiple different countries, and deposing their leadership. If that happened in the United States, there would be a nuclear war tomorrow.
I hope that people clip what you just said and share it everywhere, because that was the most poignant, spot-on assessment of what's been happening. And you're right about these red lines. I think about what was said at the beginning and the outset of this special military operation, which was we would never send tanks, we would never send jets, we would never send American personnel. That is, of course, a bridge too far. We would never send long range heavy weapons. We would never send HIMARS. We would never do these things. And at each instance, all of those red lines have been passed. And now what's left? What's the final red line? Troops on the ground? And of course, we're hearing that that is being pushed now by NATO. We've heard that from Jens Stoltenberg. We've heard that from other members of NATO. We've heard that from an admiral whose name escapes me at the moment, talking about potential troops and facing Russian forces head on. That's the next step. And each line they've crossed, what's left for us to think that they're not going to cross this next line?
You're absolutely right. That now they're normalizing the jets, they're normalizing the troops. In fact, they're even normalizing the idea of fighting a nuclear war over this conflict. There is an increasing school of thought that says, well, Russia just has to be defeated at all costs. And if that means that we're going to fight a nuclear war, so be it. When the mayor of Kiev was at the WEF, he was interviewed in this incredible interview, and he was asked the question, why do an increasing number of people in the United States and the West are asking, is it worth it to fight a nuclear war over Ukraine, especially given the fact that this is a NATO US provoked war? And without missing a beat, the mayor of Kiev, who is this U.S. CIA State Department puppet, essentially, said it's worth it because if we don't do that, Russia is next going to invade Poland, and then they're going to invade Romania, and then they're going to come and conquer all of the Western world. Who believes that? Nobody believes that. Just look at the damn map. Which bloc has come towards the other, has encircled the other over the past 3 decades since the end of the Cold War. Look at the map and you see that it's the expansion of NATO right up to the border of Russia, something that the United States promised would not happen to Gorbachev in the 90s as a condition of reunifying Germany and ending the Cold War. That was violated by every US president. And when you look at it, now we have NATO doubling in size, coming right up to the border of Russia.
So this event on the 19th, can you tell us about where people can go if they want to come to DC, watch it, be a part of it? Can you give us a little insight into how this event will unfold, this Rage Against the War Machine rally?
Absolutely. We've come together with the Libertarian Party, Action for Assange, World Beyond War, many different partner organizations in a kind of urgent emergency mobilization in the United States to come together, bring together the largest rally since the protesting war, since the Iraq War. That's what it's going to be, because that's what this moment requires. That's what this world war requires. We have to stop it before it goes nuclear, which is what will happen if there is no resistance. The only thing that is going to prevent this kind of escalation that we talked about from happening is if thousands of people get in the streets, as they did during the Vietnam War, as they did during the Iraq War, and we show that we are not going to tolerate the fact that $100 billion of our taxpayer money is going towards this war. We're not going to tolerate losing our civil liberties for these wars anymore. We're not going to tolerate the fact that we're killing hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine and have killed hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world, in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Vietnam, with these endless wars. We are in a place, Clayton, where the military-industrial complex is consuming whatever remains of the American economy. Half of our discretionary spending now goes to the military. So on February 19th, thousands of people are going to come together. We are going to rally at the Lincoln Memorial. Tulsi Gabbard's going to be there. Dennis Kucinich is going to be there. Jimmy Dore is going to be there. Ron Paul is going to be there. It's going to be an incredible lineup. Chris Hedges. We have about 20 different amazing speakers from all across the political spectrum, left and right and everywhere in between, are coming together and saying to stop a war is not, this war and nuclear war is not a left-right issue. It's a human issue. It's an existential issue. After the rally, we're going to be marching to the White House, and we're going to deliver our demands directly to that demented warmonger, Joe Biden.
And what has the media response been like? You know, I imagine the New York Times will be there, the Washington Post will be there, all of the major broadcast networks will be there. They will have their cameras set up, just like it's the inaugural address, right? President Biden out there on the dais, about to give his speech and taking up the second inaugural address. You'll have all of the mainstream media will be there covering this event, right?
You would think that would be the reaction to a declaration of world war, right? When we have nuclear weapons. But the media has abandoned the people of the United States. They've abandoned the people of the world, and they've betrayed them to a degree that is almost equal or only equal to the politicians in the United States and to the military industrial complex. They used to say that the revolution would not be televised. Apparently, the Third World War is not going to be televised until the nukes are flying, because the media and the political class have so betrayed people in this country and across the West and around the world. They never, first of all, they almost never talk about the war. And when they do, it's straight up propaganda. It's straight up propaganda about how Putin is the devil and Russia is hell bent on building the new Soviet Union, which there's no evidence for. And that's the only thing that you hear. And so, of course, all the media we've heard from the media, to the extent that they've covered it at all, is attacks. All they've done is attack the rally, try to create one division over another. And it's very strategic. It's very strategic. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised, given the history of Operation Mockingbird, given the history of media manipulation by the CIA, if in fact there is intelligence involved, because the attacks are constantly, very strategically attempting to break up the coalition, which is that of one across left and right. So that's the only reaction. Heavens forbid they actually cover the fact that there are billions of lives at stake, that hundreds of thousands of people have already died, that the Ukrainians are essentially just cannon fodder in this war, as are the Russians. None of that apparently is anything that they care about.
No, it's absolutely coordinated. We see it on a regular basis with the intelligence state. It's amazing to watch the Associated Press, the mainstream media outlets, Reuters, the BBC, almost parrot the exact same talking points within a 24-hour time period when we have an alleged, like an alleged Russian war crime or something like that, which then gets later debunked a week or so later. But as Mark Twain would say, a lie makes its way around the world before truth has a chance to put on its pants. So you have the Associated Press, you have the BBC, you have Reuters, you have these news organizations coming out with these reports with unnamed sources almost immediately. And it's clearly, look, I don't want to be terribly cynical, but it looks clearly coordinated from some sort of intelligence component of all of this.
Look at what happened when the Ukrainian missile struck Poland. There was a straight 24 hours
Yes.
where they were talking about, as if it was a certainty, that Russia had bombed a NATO country, triggering Article 5. World War III was trending all across Twitter, and then of course, that was, there's different perspectives. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that it was a deliberate provocation from a Ukrainian Zelensky regime, despotic regime, that knows that it's losing this war and has repeatedly stated that it wants a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia and is trying to drag other countries into the conflict, is trying to trigger Article 5. And so I think that's the kind of thing that we need to look for right now, Clayton. And I know you've talked about it. I talked about it recently with Kim Iverson. A lot of people are talking about it. And the more attention that we can bring to it, the better. And that is the fact that when you look at our history, all the way back to the Spanish-American War, the First World War, the Second World War, there is a sense, especially in the United States, Americans are generally very reluctant to fight wars. And of course, the United States is the dominant, the preeminent aggressor in this war. But that's why there always is a false flag or some kind of action that is used to gin up jingoism and hysteria that is then turned towards a war and used to justify the next escalation, the escalations that the American people would otherwise say, hell no. And so those, look for that kind of thing right now. Look for it to justify the deployment of F-16s, the creation of a no-fly zone, the deployment of troops. They're sending, I mean, what you have going on right now is that the CIA and the military-industrial deep state is essentially deploying its number one favorite errand boy, David Petraeus, to go deliver its message on the Sunday shows on ABC, a crazy message. The things that he's talking about is that Putin should be assassinated, he should be deposed, the country should be broken up. So look for that kind of thing. And now he's talking about a coalition of the willing. So look to that guy if you want an indication of where the kind of, military industrial deep state is going. And what they're talking about now is a coalition of the willing of countries that are going to send troops that are going to invade Ukraine from the West and directly confront Russian soldiers.
Yep, it's coming. It's coming. And thank you guys for what you're doing. So the event is happening on the 19th of February. That's a Sunday in Washington, D.C. People can go to, what's the web address? We'll have it linked up in the description if people want to come to D.C., if they want to watch it, be a part of it, donate, get the message out.
It's rageagainstwar.com. Come stand up to the military-industrial complex with us, because nothing other than people power is going to stop this war.
Well said. Nick, thank you for what you're doing. I hope that's a big success. We will be promoting it heavily here on Redacted. And thank you again for joining us here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clayton. And thank you for the clarity that you lend to this war and this crisis at your channel.
So thank you so much, Nick. And the website, again, is rageagainstwar.com. You can go there and check it out. And you can also see, you can see all the stuff. You can donate right there. You can see the different speakers who are involved. You can buy some different clothing as well. Check them out. So again, rageagainstwar.com. So our thanks to them for doing what they're doing. It's unbelievable, really, isn't it? I mean, that we don't have an anti-war movement in the United States anymore. You just think about the images, right, from the 1960s and into the 1970s. People trying to get us out of Vietnam and these proxy wars, and where has it gone?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Like, you look at Vietnam, you had videos, you had like the caskets coming out, you saw the pictures, you saw the reality of war. The Gulf War, they had tons of videos and everything, you saw the reality. And then in Desert Storm, they're like, no more videos, no more pictures. And so now any other war that we're into, it's all textual, it's all easy to manipulate, and anybody that shows videos or anything are silent. So it's like they've made it so that they can propagandize them easier because they don't have video evidence. Because we've learned, when Desert Storm, when WikiLeaks released the videos of what was actually going on, again, we rose up because we realized what was going on. So they just try harder and harder to hide what's actually going on in war.
Yeah, they don't allow anymore there's been not whistleblowers, but journalists who were in Iraq covering it and were told by the U.S. military, you can't film that, you can't film that. And of course, you had those embedded reporters who would go out and cover those stories. But they're literally propagandists because they're being embedded with military units and being shown things that they're allowed to see and cover. You're not allowed to film that. If you do, we will confiscate your tapes on the way out, which is exactly what happened.
Just watch. You ever see the movie Three Kings with George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg?
Right, yeah.
Like, that's a really good movie that shows the embedded journalists and how they were told, like, where they could go and all that. And there was, like, burnings and stuff, like, the burning piles. They're like, stay away from that. Don't go to that
film
story.
that. Don't film that.
Here's a good story. We're going to set you up and put you with a colonel, and you're going to run around with him, and he's going to tell you what you need to know.
And we also don't show flag draped coffins coming down at Dover Air Force Base either. Like, we don't show that anymore like we used to. We don't show that. Keep that off television. So it is sanitized. It's totally sanitized. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.